Not every night, but, sometimes when we feel like it. Sometimes when we watch something funny that we want to comment on.
Just for fun.
Just for fun, right. And we saw something today.
That was pretty funny.
It was Dave Rubin on his Rubin Report show talking about Bill Maher and how Bill Maher basically stole all of his good ideas and then begging Bill Maher to come on the Rubin Report.
To me, when people say to me sometimes like, boy, you go after the left a lot these days. Why? I'm like, because you're embarrassing me. That's why I'm going after the left in a way you never did before. Because you're inverting things that I'm not going to give up on being liberal. This is what these teachers are talking about, that you're taking children and making them hyper-aware of race in a way they wouldn't otherwise be. I mean, I saw last night on the football game, Alicia Keys sang Lift Every Voice and Sing, which now I hear is called the Black National Anthem. Now, maybe we should get rid of our national anthem, but I think we should have one national anthem. I think when you go down a road where you're having two different national anthems, colleges sometimes now many of them have different graduation ceremonies for black and white, separate dorms. This is what I mean, segregation. You've inverted the idea. We're going back to that under a different name.
Bill, you have to understand what's going on here. First off, I just want to say thank you for repeating everything that I was saying 5 years ago, right? I've been screaming about this stuff for 5 years. Watch my Why I Left the Left video from PragerU from 5 years ago, okay? So that's nice, and I know that your guys watch my show, so I'll talk directly to the producers of the show. Everything that Bill said there is now conservative. Yes, we shouldn't have two national anthems. I don't know what he meant by we should maybe change our national anthem. No, we shouldn't. But yes, they're teaching racism in school. They're teaching this hyper-racialized thing in school. It's coming. There's no liberals to stand up for this stuff. And then he brings on people like Adam Schiff on his show, and it's obvious that he supports a guy like Adam Schiff. And we see this with all the liberals. A guy like like Joe Rogan, for example. And these are not, I'm really trying not to make these personal attacks. I'm trying to talk about this in the idea set of what these guys talk about. Joe Rogan, in an odd sense, did the right thing because he was a Bernie supporter, which made no sense, right? In my view, it makes no sense to be a Bernie supporter. You sit down with people like Jordan Peterson and all these brilliant people for years and years and years, and at the end, when it came down to it for the presidency, you were supporting Bernie Sanders. Makes no sense. But Joe Rogan, when he signed the $100 million deal, which I'm told is a lot more than $100 million with Spotify, he lived in California. And you know what he did right before he signed the deal? He left. He went to Texas. But the thing that he was telling everybody to vote for, that he's voting for, Bernie Sanders, was to raise taxes on everybody, especially people like him. So the liberals, in this sense, they're all still confused. They're looking at their watch, and a watch should be right twice a day, but they can't seem to ever get it right. They can't seem to ever get it right. So it's like, Bill Maher, take the last step here. I get it, you're in Hollywood. You've made your career on being a liberal. That is a lofty goal and a worthwhile thing. Trust me, I get it more than most people. But at this point, unless you're willing to say, I will not support any Democrats, it doesn't mean the Republicans are great, but everything you believe in is now a Republican principle. Now, if you really still think that high taxation makes sense, if you really still think that handouts make sense and affirmative action makes sense and some of that stuff, well, then we just got to keep teaching you a little bit. But I don't even think he believes in that stuff. I've seen him talk to Ben Shapiro. He doesn't really disagree. We could send him a couple Thomas Sowell videos. I don't think he disagrees with that, but I get it. His whole brand, and again, this isn't an attack on him. His brand is, I've been the liberal, like conservatives, and this was also the dangerous. If you keep saying that everybody else, the conservatives, they're always racist and bigots and backwards, and in Bill's case, they're also believers, right? They're believers, they're religious, so they must be idiots, which is also a big problem that the liberals have, and they better freaking get over it. Well, now he's painted himself in a corner, so he can't really do anything. So anyway, to the producers that I know watch this, which is why Bill repeats everything that I say all the time, because even the stuff right there about national anthems and all that, like, yeah, I was doing it months ago. It's like, Bill's welcome here. We'll do it unedited. I'm happy to be on his show. I'm not attacking him. I don't even really want to be on the show anymore. I've been canceled a couple of times. I'm sort of like, it's not even about me. I sort of retract that.
So, it's not the first time that he's, acted thirsty like this. I think that Dave Rubin to me is, more than any other commentator, at least on the conservative side, able to say, when he talks, he says almost nothing of value and says nothing. Has no substance, says nothing, thinks nothing original. Whereas, you see a lot of other these commentators, like whether it's Tucker Carlson or all these crazy people on Fox News, they oftentimes do say things. They lie, they tell or they distort, they lie, they say things that are false, they're mendacious, they're malignant. Whereas Dave Rubin will speak and speak and speak and speak and say almost nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Except for about how he really wants to talk about ideas.
Yeah, and that's his favorite term, ideas. He's always talking about ideas, even though he has none.
No, but if you notice, though, the ideas never get talked about. He's always talking about how he wants to talk about ideas.
Right.
But the ideas never get discussed. It's just talking about how he wants to talk about the ideas.
Right, exactly.
No, there were so many great scenes in that clip, in that video. There were so many great scenes in that video clip. There were just too many. Not least of which was his desperate, thirsty, begging, but also kind of trying to compliment himself when he was asking Bill Maher to be on his show. He's like, since I've obviously been saying this every day for the last 5 years. He's like, you can come on my show, I come on your show. I don't even really want to go on your show. I mean, it's fine. I don't need to go on your show. I mean, I kind of don't even care, actually. I don't give a shit at all.
Also, he said he basically took credit for what Bill Maher was saying, and which we like to call him Boomer Maher because, he was born in the Boomer generation, and he has a lot of
Boomer
takes and misinformed views about millennials and Gen Zers and whatnot. But basically, he's taking credit for something Bill Maher said, which was so just unoriginal. And
yeah, a lot of people have said it.
You've heard it from conservatives. You've heard it from all sorts of people for the past 10 years.
Liberals have said it.
Right.
It's not not unoriginal. It's not like a weird or out of the mainstream take. But then he's like, oh, well, clearly your producers are watching my show. No, I don't think so, big guy.
No. And, he basically said that because Bill Maher said, the left's gone too far to the left, especially on cultural issues, that there have been, apparently, Bill Maher's producers have been taking note of Dave Rubin and have been following him very closely and have been taking notes, as has Bill Maher. And apparently, I didn't know this, but Dave Rubin revealed that specific take, that the left is moving too far left, was invented, in fact, by Dave Rubin.
Yeah.
And that now that Dave Rubin has trademarked that, every single person who ever says that has to reference the original author, who Dave Rubin says is Dave Rubin, even though that's not true.
I know, it's so good. I also love how he's like, I get it, man. I get it. He's all trying to be, relatable and pretend like he's not attacking them. But he's attacking them because he's all better man over Joe Rogan, not inviting him back on his show to talk about his crappy book. And then he's like, and that's why you left California. I get it, man. It's like, I'm sorry, aren't you one of those people that constantly talks about how much you hate California but won't leave? Why don't you go? Why don't you go to Texas? Or, you know what, better yet, stop moving to one of the big cities, because Texas has some big cities. Why don't you go move to Mississippi, Playboy? Why don't you go move to, Missouri? Why don't you go move to one of those red states? I love how the right wing loves to talk about red states and real America, and how blue states aren't real America. But none of them want to live there. All those people that you listen to that are always talking about real America and the blue state elites all live in blue states. And none of them want to live in the red states. None of them want to live in Missouri or in Ohio. Tell me, how many of them live there? None of them. And then he's like, and not only did I come up with all these ideas that he didn't come up with, but then when he was also like, and by the way, those aren't things that even liberals believe. All the ideas that people believe are Republican ideas. No, they're not. No, they're not. None of the things that he mentioned are specifically Republican ideas. Grievance is not a policy proposal. It's not a position, like a legislative position.
Right. I mean, it's the only thing that really fuels the Republican Party now, but, you brought up how there are a lot of Republican commentators who live in blue states, and they complain a lot.
And if they do live in a red state, or like a kind of red but like trending blue state, or one you could even call like a purple state, it's ones that have major cities.
Right.
And they live in the major cities. So when they're like Texas or Florida, it's like Florida is a massive state with massive cities like Miami, and Texas is like one of the biggest states in the country that also has massive cities like Dallas and Austin and shit.
Right. And if you're a conservative commentator who lives in a blue state, you kind of live in a quote unquote self-imposed exile of sorts. And that itself becomes a part of your political identity. Like Dave Rubin, a big part of his political identity and his political rhetoric centers around being a so-called conservative in a blue state like California, and a good amount of his commentary is based around that.
Right.
And someone like Dave Rubin, who doesn't really talk about any original ideas or come up with his own ideas or anything interesting in terms of policy or substance. If he loses that, let's say he moves to like Tennessee or like Mississippi, or let's say he moves to South Dakota to really follow through on his rhetoric, he would lose a good chunk.
Taking the fight to South Dakota.
Right, he would lose a good chunk of his content. Like a lot of his content and the show that he has revolves around him not liking the blue state that he lives in. So
seriously, think about it. For anybody that actually watches, which I don't know honestly how many people watch it, not to make fun of it, because that's certainly the only reason why I ever watch clips. But like, if you are watching it, when does he ever talk about something just because he actually is a proponent of it? When?
Yeah.
He always, everything he talks about is in relation to how the left is bad. So like anytime he's talking about anything, it's always like, here's why the right and me are victims. Here's why the left are tyrannical Marxists and they're going to ruin the country. Here's why, whatever grievance of the day. Everything is in relation to how he is this marginalized right-winger in a, leftist state, and how he's just trying to survive. Yeah. It's like Survivor. He's just on the island full of leftists, and he's just this, simple man who just wants to try to get away from it all, and he's just fighting the good fight here.
Yeah, and you've seen a lot of that in the past 5 years, especially since Trump was president, where there are these quote-unquote liberals who say that they're liberal, and almost everything that they say, before they say that they're a liberal, and then they trash liberals. There's this whole, like...
It's a whole industry.
Niche, yeah. There's this whole niche pundit class now of people like Dave Rubin and Glenn Greenwald and others who maybe have had, liberal views in the past, but now they use it as a cudgel in their own rhetoric to basically say that liberals have lost their way, and that actually, it's basically Reagan's old saying, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me. They're basically just trying to revive that and say that, except the problem now is that there's so many of these ex-quote-unquote liberals, and so many of them have Substacks and blogs and podcasts and everything. It's just become saturated with these people who are kind of like living in this political no man's land because it seemed convenient for a while for their brand. And now I think that a lot of them are going to have, some of them at least, maybe not Dave Rubin, but some of the other like smaller figures in that ecosystem are going to have to pack it up and get real jobs because there's not really a constituency for that kind of rhetoric.
Well, especially for people that actually never had a political ideology and they're just doing it because now, like, they're just trying to, like, ride the train of, like, oh, I'm a liberal and I hate liberals, or I used to be a liberal and I hate liberals. It's all just, like, a fucking grift.
Yeah.
It's just, like, trying to make money off it. Like, come to my Patreon.
Although I should say that there's something equivalent on the left that isn't exactly equivalent because it's more... I don't like the people who say it, but I trust in most cases that they're doing it in good faith. Is this pundit class of like never Trumpers? Like the Trump scrambled the political calculus at least in the media, I don't think he really scrambled the parties that much or the coalitions that much. It's more in the media, these people in the media that he scrambled, where all of a sudden there were these liberals who, quote unquote, thought Trump had some good ideas and weren't saying that Trump was right on everything, but the left has lost its way. And then on the other side, you had these, neocon never Trumpers who said, he's undermining the dignity of the office, and when presidents lie, they used to lie with class, and now he's just lying, and we want the classy liars back. So, but at the same time, I think that also reflects how the media doesn't represent, the actual, actually what people believe, at the grassroots, because I don't think that the coalitions got scrambled like that. I just think that the media class got scrambled by it.
Right, and they always think, especially the people who are like way too online, which actually is like most people in the media, they think that their views are representative of regular people. They're like, oh, they're always speaking for people. Like, this is what people think. This is what people think. This is what's happening with the coalitions. I love, my favorite one is, there's a realignment happening. No, there's not. No, there's not. Where's this right-wing populace coming in? Especially since when they're like in that Dave Rubin video when he's like, I'm sorry, we're gonna still support like lower taxes. Okay, lower taxes, when the right wing says it, that just means lower taxes on extremely like top 1% people, billionaires and corporations. That's all it means. It's an incomplete sentence. They don't ever mean lower taxes on middle class people, whatever middle class means today, because there like is none. And they don't mean it on working class people, and they certainly don't mean it on poor people. What they mean when they say lower taxes, like Sean Hannity always does when he's going through his like propaganda segment, lower taxes, freedom, blah, blah, blah. They mean lower taxes on the extremely wealthy and corporations. That's what that means. So when he was like, I don't know why he would support Bernie if he cares about lower taxes.
Right, exactly.
That's not a realignment, by the way.
Right. And there's a the coalitions, especially the conservative media class, they know better than just about anybody in the media what their role is. They act like they have some kind of authenticity, but really their priorities are about as laser focused as anybody else that's out there, whether that's a media figure or a politician. Their job is to distract the rubes, get them riled up, get them to vote for Republicans so that the Chamber of Commerce, people like Mitch McConnell and, others in the Republican Party can slash taxes, get their corporate judges who might throw them a bone on abortion or some other social issue, that they can rile them up with. And
then, like, every once in a while, if they don't rule that way, then Democrats be like, see, the court's moderate. It's moderate.
Right. Exactly. So I think that, there's this, but we've known that about, the conservative chattering class. Like, that's the way it's been since, Rush Limbaugh kind of took off and revolutionized the whole white grievance, Republican commentary that, and that's what you saw when, it was used to great effect in 1994 when the Republicans retook the House, off of grassroots or, talk radio types like Rush Limbaugh and others who, for the first time, were able to broadcast their views without the fairness doctrine, which was a doctrine that the, FCC had that said, if you present one side of an issue, you have to present the other side in an equal amount of time. And shortly after that, figures like Rush Limbaugh emerged, and big business and other Republican priorities saw that they could, hijack this burgeoning movement and basically say, like, we can converge our interests with these sort of right-wing social interests that rile up, white conservatives. So people can throw them a bone on abortion and throw them a bone on, other issues, social issues. And when they're in power, when they're in the halls of power, in the corridors of power, in the smoke-filled rooms, they can serve our interests and cut taxes and serve as bodyguards basically for corporations, and that is the only relevance that the Republican Party has to the donor class and the corporations, corporate PACs right now.
And it's been like that forever. It's been like that forever. That's why I can't stand when I hear people say, especially people who are on the left, say like, oh, there's a realignment happening. No, there's not. No, there's not. They are the same people that they've always been. And their job is to have rodeo clowns out in the front throwing red meat and talking about issues like abortion and guns to rile people up so that while they're getting their show from the rodeo clowns and they're getting entertained, the people in the background, the actual legislators like Mitch McConnell, are like, good. While they're entertained, what do you want, donor class? Exactly. What do you need? What bills do you want passed? More tax cuts for the rich, more drilling, more billionaire subsidies, anything you want. More labor protections gutted. Make sure every right-wing judge who, despite the fact that the social issues get all the attention, always rule in favor of corporations, no matter what the case is. And always vote against environmental protections and have somehow convinced the right wing that they shouldn't care about environmental issues, even if it's their water being poisoned. They don't care. So while they're out there, having, their little puppet being like, fuck the libs and, they suck and yeah, let's kill them. Then in the background, you got the grown-ups, and the grown-ups are the people like Mitch McConnell who actually know how to get shit done and are like actually the ones implementing all these insanely unpopular policies that if right-wingers actually really cared about policy and actually paid attention to the things that he was doing and the things that the Republican Party establishment actually did and who they're actually really serving, probably would never get a vote again because people don't support those really unpopular policies, which is why they always have to gerrymander and continue to cheat in order to stay in office.
Yeah, exactly. And you saw this recently with the Texas abortion law. Mm-hmm. You had in 2010 basically a massive Republican retrenchment in the state legislatures who then were able to draw, maps that kept them in power until this day in a lot of states, and certainly in historically red states like Texas. So Texas basically wrote this law that was jerry-rigged so it couldn't be struck down, right away, so that it would have to go into effect, basically, and that's what happened, due to the conservative Supreme Court. But what you saw is even just how unpopular their ideas actually are. You've heard some conservative states since then, and maybe they will, I don't know if they're going to do it yet, but they talked about we need to study this and maybe do what Texas is doing. And yet, since that law happened, none of those states have rushed to pass a similar law. No. It's almost as if they understand how unpopular their policies are.
Right. Even Ted Cruz, who... sorry, I laugh because he's so unbearable. Who loves to be on camera and I really don't understand people who support Ted Cruz because he's just so phony. Even people who are super conservative, how do you not hate Ted Cruz? He's just so over the top fake. And he loves to get on the camera and be like, Hattie and I were outraged. And we really care. And it's so insincere and gag worthy. But he didn't even want to come out and get in front of the camera like he usually does. He released a statement through his spokesperson. And that was it. Yep. That was it. Usually they love to get in front of the camera and be hand wringing and punch a woman in the stomach while pregnant and be like, but they didn't even want to do that. It was just a statement through his spokesperson, and then he was that kid in the GIF.
You see, exactly, and you see what you see about conservatives is that they are at their most effective when they are out of power.
Yes.
Unable to produce policy and implement policy, and rail against policy and incite grievance, because once they actually achieve some of their policy goals, it's like touching a hot stove. It's like you realize, oh shit, this is actually really unpopular and nobody really likes that. So that's why you see Ted Cruz, for years and years and years talking about the right to life and being pro-life and blah, 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 blah. And then when something like that happens with the Texas abortion law, he releases, the statement through his spokesperson who says, Senator Cruz believes that it should be up to the states, left to the states. Nothing like, it's the bravest law in 100 years, and I stand firmly behind it, and I'll argue it at Supreme Court. I'll go to the Supreme Court and argue the case. It's like, nope, we leave it up to the states because I know that it's actually unpopular.
Right, like he did with the big lie one, where he was like, I'll go to the Supreme Court and argue it. And the only reason why he said that, going to your point about how they love being out of power, because then they can cry about repealing Obamacare 100 times or whatever, and then they were like flat-footed when they actually had the chance to repeal it. He said that about the big lie case because he probably most likely knew that they weren't going to take it, which is exactly what happened. They didn't even take the case because they knew it was a joke. So he said that so that he could look like a hero, knowing that the court wasn't even going to take up the case.
Exactly.
So how all of this relates to Dave Rubin, I don't know. We kind of got off on a tangent, but the point is, he's really dumb.
He's really, yeah. Well, I mean, this speaks more to to Dave Rubin than it does to us, just because he's such a vapid, substanceless commentator that inevitably you end up talking about something else, because there's not much to say about him except that he's obviously a fraud. Mm-hmm. He's not very bright. He doesn't have any original ideas, and he's not even interesting in the way that someone like, let's say, Tucker Carlson is, in a sense of just being personally interesting and like how odious he is, or like, how cruel he is. Like, Dave Rubin is just totally anodyne, and there's nothing to him really except, I'm a gay liberal who's actually a conservative, and here's why liberals are bad.
Right, and also he is really substanceless, and he doesn't bring anything into the conversation. And he's also, I hate his voice. I hate the way he talks. He's so annoying. It's just so insincere. Like, you can just feel the insincerity when he talks. He actually, remember Bolsonaro? When he blocked me on Twitter a long time ago. So I only can see these clips if other podcasters show them, or through the Twitter account Dave Rubin clips, that somebody compiles really funny clips of him and plays them. Or if Sam Cedar will play them, which is always great. But he had done this, I think it was in the same stream, where he called Bolsonaro, and he was like defending his anti-gay policy. And then I made a comment like, I don't even remember what I said. It was something to the effect of like, you're defending a dictator who basically thinks that you shouldn't exist, or something like that. And it was like, block. He like blocked me immediately. I was like, wait a minute. Why would you do that? I was just trying to like have a conversation, have ideas, have a conversation, free speech. I thought we were talking about free speech here. I thought we were just, engaging in the battle of ideas.
You know what you should do? You should sue Dave Rubin in civil court and say that he censored you because, you can't view his tweets anymore, and that's censorship, and that violates the First Amendment.
It does, actually, especially since I was just trying to have ideas and talk about the battle and have the battle of ideas. But, you're right. What's his name? What's his bucket? The cow guy.
Devin Nunes.
Nunes. He sues everyone, okay? Sues constantly because he gets, like, dark right-wing money from somewhere. Or somebody's trying to spigot on. And he's always suing people. So I'm like, all right, well, first of all, so then maybe I should sue Dave Rubin, because, I am not able to see his tweets because he censored me for just trying to engage in the battle of ideas with him. And, I really don't like having my free speech oppressed like that. And, for the right wing, it's always like, free speech, free speech, free speech, free speech, rah, 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 free speech. But whenever free speech is censored on the left, They're nowhere to be found. Again, that kid's gif where he's like, disappears. They're gone. Like, anytime it comes to somebody getting fired because they, supported BDS, where are you at? Gone. Never defends their freedom of speech rights or freedom to protest rights. Protesters get ran over by ICE, nowhere to be found. And then when it comes to like just today, okay, this is an example of just today. They are always crying about free speech being heard, having a platform, not being silenced or censored. And then some lunatic on Newsmax, I think it was, like cried and cut off a veteran and like went psycho because the veteran tepidly, very mildly and respectfully, even started out his comment with, I respectfully disagree and think that Trump was also partially at fault for the Iraq war or the Afghanistan war withdrawal. Okay? He wasn't even rude, okay? I don't even know the guy's name, the veteran, because he cut him off. And then, like a fucking snowflake. And he cut him off, and then he cut his mic, and then cut him off his show. And then actually the most amazing part was he tried to act like he was, like, cool for it. Like, he was, like, strong for cutting him off. He was like, see? We don't do this on my show! We don't do this on my show! We don't talk about the dear leader like that! We don't! We don't talk about the dear leader like that. What, you think this is America? This is North Korea, motherfucker! Okay?
Right.
Don't talk about the dear leader like that. And then he was like, all like butthurt about it. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's kind of amazing how they're all about free speech and freedom to dissent and discussion and ideas, all up until you are someone who even tepidly disagrees with them. Then you're censored, you're cut off, your mic is cut, you're, a fascist, you're a socialist, lunatic, Marxist, whatever. They'll cut you off their TV. They don't give a shit if you get fired from your job. Then all of a sudden, no. And then they're just being strong. They're just patriots when they do that, okay? Right. So you are, an authoritarian, suppressing speech, monster, liberal, all the things that they say when they blame liberals for being against speech. But if you're a right-winger and you do it, well, you're just
then you're a hero. You're a hero because you stood up to that veteran.
Yeah. Brave.
Brave. Very brave.
It took churning of ideas for thousands of years.